Strieber, who's one of your guests. I haven't read Communion yet, but I got the audiobook of them that I've listened to 4 or 5 times. Man, do I get some weird nightmares when I listen to that and fall asleep during it. But it's a very good audiobook.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was based on letters that were written to him after he wrote Communion.
Yeah, and he does talk about the communion there, and he has some good points in general about all the various theories, and he does seem very neutral in it,
He
which I like.
top guy. Whitley's fantastic, and people need to pay attention to him. Again, I think he's getting overlooked a little bit. He is still today, still doing podcasts, still doing Unknown Country. He still is putting out fantastic stuff and is still a really important person in the community. I read his book literally when it came out, which is like 87. And I remember people telling me that, well, he's a fiction writer. That was his day job at the time when all this happened and he came out with Communion. He had written Wolfen and a few other best-selling books. And that was a great point. You know what? You're right. The guy's a science fiction writer. Maybe he's making this up. But now you flash forward, it's been, 40 years, and he's as knee deep in this community as he's ever been. He sticks to all of his stories. He still talks about this. He still doesn't know what's actually happening. And I feel like he's more credible today than he was in 1987 when we didn't know this much about him. And he didn't spend most of his life researching these topics.
Yeah, it's funny. I discovered him because I saw him do an interview with Jim Semivan, a
Mhm.
former CIA guy who's very credible again, and he had a negative experience actually, him and
Yep.
his wife. Um, but I was watching this podcast. I'm like, why is this guy interrupting Jim Semivan so much? No one wants to hear about him. Then I look up who Whitley Strieber is, and I'm like, of course.
Yes.
How could I even have been offended by that after
He's
I
on our
figured out who
Legends
it was?
panel for a reason, deservedly so. That's where a guy like Whitley Strieber is a perfect example of somebody like he still doesn't know what happened to him. And he says, I've been known as the alien guy. I never said it was aliens. He doesn't know what it is. Fascinating. Those are the people that I gravitate to, that I feel personally have the stronger cases and the more compelling stories.
Yeah, and I find that interesting about him too from that book that I recently bought.
Them.
Yes, where he's talking about he doesn't know what they are. He thinks they might be aliens, but they could be a number of things. But he also talks about how much it bothered him that he actually, according to his story, he experienced anal tearing, which was traumatic, and it still bothers him, and it became a big joke. And he
Absolutely.
finds that very insulting.
But how horrible, yeah, well, I mean, how horrible that this guy had to go through that on top of everything else. It's not enough. He had to have this abduction experience. Now he's got this physical ailment and the ridicule of that and the jokes of that. It's just ridiculous. Good for him for getting through all that. You know what I mean?
The one story in them that I always have to skip this chapter because it really bothered me. I think I listened to it twice. Was there was a young girl that was abducted that supposedly, according to the letter he got, actually got infected with something, and she came and told her mom she was sick after the abduction, and she actually became deathly ill within weeks after that and died. And the aliens, I guess, apologized to the mom and said she's too young to treat for this. I think it was some form of bugs that they called it, but yeah, that was a sad story. I think she was like 10 or under.
Wow, can you imagine? I mean, losing your daughter, and then on top of it, here's why she's telling you that an alien took me away and gave me this illness accidentally. I mean, wow, that's a tough one to swallow. Your heart goes out to those people, right?
Yeah, the one thing that I always wonder about, and I'm sure it is a factor, is like just being exposed to some, if they are from other planets, if you're entering their ship that has been open in this environment that may have stuff floating around in it, that we are poison to whatever this is, and them coming here too. I'm sure there's issues with Earth itself. That's why I've heard some reasons why they go underwater, because it's more of a stable environment. But yeah, you think about just the environmental differences in the atmospheres.
Or the like you know the contagions, like you said, the bugs, the look how careful NASA is opening up a moon rock. You know, everything's got to stay in a you know secure, safe thing because who knows, and we don't want to get any microbes. We don't want to send microbes across the galaxy. You know, it's true that's a very real possibility. I mean, they could accidentally cough on somebody and wipe out our whole planet, or vice versa.